Hey there, welcome back to the show. On November 6th, I am hosting a 7-day Conscious Love Challenge, and I want you to be there. We've done this a few times now, and it has been phenomenal each time. The participants have received so much value, the feedback has been incredible, and this next one is going to be the best one yet. This is an opportunity for us to spend 7 days together, working closely and going through the core distinctions and practices that allow you to create conscious love. Whether you're looking to deepen your existing relationship or create a conscious, loving partnership with someone new, this challenge is for you, and I can't wait to meet you and work together. You can find the details for the challenge in the show notes below wherever you're listening to this podcast. Make sure to check it out and grab your spot now. We start in just 2 weeks, and space is filling up fast. Thanks for joining today, and let's get back to the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler here, as always. Pleasure to be on with you today. Looking forward to diving in. Today, we're speaking about dating fatigue and keeping hope alive after experiencing repeated disappointment. And I know just from so many of you that I hear from that this is a big deal, right? And the feeling of trying again and being disappointed and being let down and being heartbroken and trying again and maintaining hope, right? Like maintaining hope and excitement and inspiration and feeling positive and feeling good and feeling like you could actually meet the kind of person that you want to meet, or you could actually have the kind of partnership you want to have. And I hear it from women a lot that, you feel like men haven't really done the work, right? That men aren't really conscious or aware in a way that they're ready for the kind of relationship you want to have. And, you go out and you meet different kinds of men, and it seems like none of them are ready or in a place where they're commitment ready or commitment minded, or that they've done the healing work or the self-awareness work to be ready for a relationship. And I know that that's so real for so many of you, especially the ladies. And I think men probably feel similar in a lot of ways too. I know I hear from a lot of men that, they feel like they try to be a good guy and they try to be, the kind of guy that a woman would want them to be. And yet they seem like they really struggle, right? They seem like nobody's really interested in them, or they constantly feel like they're put in the friend zone. And I think, there are different sides to this conversation, but the truth is that it's hard. And I want to acknowledge that as we start today's conversation, is that the dating world is tough. And being in a position where you're looking for a conscious relationship is tough. Because I think it's easy when you're just, or it maybe not easy, but it's easier when you're just willing to go out and hook up with whoever and have whatever kind of relationship. Like, it's maybe a lot more easier to hook up with someone in that way. But when you're really clear about the kind of relationship you want and the kind of qualities that you want a partner to have and the depth of connection and conversation that you're looking for, and, the way that you want to grow and build with someone, and it can feel like you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Like how it can seem almost impossible to actually find someone who is ready for that kind of relationship, to find someone that you relate with on that level, and to be able to build and grow and be on the same page with someone. And I know how that feels. I mean, I've been there, and it's been, I've been with my wife 8 years now, so it was 8 years ago that I was in that position, but I remember what that felt like. And I talked to, the students in my program and the people that I coach, and I'm aware of how exhausting the process can be and how much fatigue you can feel after trying again and trying again and trying again. And as the years go by, and maybe you get into a relationship or you even get married, and then a marriage falls apart, right? And you feel like, wow, like I thought I found it. And then 5 years later, I realized I didn't have it. And how can I feel secure that that's not going to happen again? If I fall in love with someone and get married again, how do I know that's not going to happen to me again? Right? How do I know 5 years from then I'm not going to be once again disillusioned and disappointed and left alone, regretting and all of that, right? So the idea of starting again after heartbreak and the energy it takes to be hopeful and be optimistic and feel inspired and feel like, it's a real possibility. Like you could actually find the kind of partnership and the kind of relationship that you're looking for. That can be an exhausting process. And so today I want to really speak into some really practical guidance and tools that can help you to feel more connected, to feel more inspired, to feel more hopeful, to believe in the possibility of what's out there. But I'm going to say even beyond that is not just to believe like, oh, I can get it or I can have it. Like, yes, that's part of it. But part of it also is to let go of the need for it in such a strong way so that you can be happy now. And I want to talk about that today too, is like sometimes, and I'm not saying that, it's not going to happen. I believe that it does happen. I see it happen with my clients, people I work with. Like I see it happen so often, and I believe it does happen. I know it happens. But I think part of it is the need for it to happen and this pressure that we live under. It takes us out of our experience of our joy in the moment, and it kind of steals the present moment and the joy from us. And so I want to talk about that today too. I want to talk about how do we find more joy and fulfillment and happiness in the now, and find a kind of peace within ourselves and within our hearts and within our lives as a whole, that as we live with this kind of joy and peace and contentment, we feel less desperate for love. And we have more energy, and we have more hope and more optimism, and we're not so fatigued. We're not so exhausted. And relationships don't hold so much weight for us. They're not so heavy anymore. There's not so much pressure around them. And then as we can feel our way into that and start to become more content in our own lives and within ourselves, we start to actually be attracted to people more often. We start to attract people more often. We start to have better connections. The connections we do have less pressure around them, and the whole experience just becomes a lot easier. There's a lot more, it feels more natural. There's a lot more flow to it, a lot more effortlessness to it. And so I want to explore all of this today. And again, I know this is a big topic, and part of what inspired today's topic was actually a question that was sent into me. And so I want to start by reading that question. And it came after last week's podcast, where if you weren't with me last week, I was talking about how to heal from heartbreak. And in last week's podcast, we talked about healing from heartbreak. And this question came in. She's asking, I'm confident that I processed to a great degree the heartbreak of my life. Just a few weeks ago, I learned my ex-husband was getting remarried, and that brought up some residual feelings, but I worked through them and I'm good. So now the question is, how do you handle it later in life when the heartbreaks have piled on and you are just plain exhausted? The thought of investing time and effort into another relationship and the possibility of ending it in heartbreak makes me want to say no thank you to any relationship. So many of my friends feel the same. On top of it, there's so many in the dating pool that haven't done the healing work, and I'm finding that I can spot this pretty quickly. I know the time and effort and expense that I've invested in my own healing, and the thought of working with someone who hasn't done much healing work, which seems to be the majority, makes me quite frankly repulsed by relationships. So I just want to, I know the person who sent in this question is going to be listening to this podcast. So to you, and I'm not going to call you out by name, but I do just want to say, sending love to you, and I hear you. And I know it's not only me who hears you, but I know so many of the people who are listening right now feel the same. And as I've acknowledged, but I'll just say it again, like it is exhausting, right? It can be exhausting. And I want to give you some support in terms of, how you can shift your relationship with it so that you feel better about the process. And so much of what we experience is when we are defining our personal experience and we are making our personal experience conditional based on what we're experiencing around us. Right? Our life, our identity, our sense of self, our sense of worth, our experience, our mood, our energy is being defined by the things that we're experiencing around us. So the people we go on dates with, the people who have done the healing work or haven't done the healing work, or so much of it, right? We're allowing our identity and our experience and our sense of self to be defined by the things we're experiencing around us. I was watching a video from Gangaji this morning. She's a spiritual teacher, and I was watching this video, and I thought what she said was really profound. I want to share it. She said that in order to protect ourselves from heartbreak, so many of us will perpetually live in heartbreak. And when I heard that, I thought it speaks so much into today's conversation, right? In order to protect ourselves from heartbreak, so many of us perpetually live in heartbreak. And I've often touched on this idea that I would rather be cynical and closed off and disconnected and shut down within myself than be hopeful and optimistic and be played a fool again. Right? Like I would rather just call it out right now and say, it's never going to happen for me. Everyone out there sucks. Nobody's done the healing work. Nobody's ready for a relationship. Men suck or women suck or whatever it is. But I would rather just call it all out right now and say that everything sucks and everyone sucks and it's not possible and it's never going to happen. And I would rather do that than actually be hopeful and be optimistic and be wrong and be played a fool. And what Gangaji said in this video, and I thought it was brilliant, profound what she said, is she said that when you live with an open heart, your heart is going to be broken over and over and over and over and over again. And this is just the nature of life. Like even if you get into a relationship and you find your perfect person and you get married and you live happily ever after, that doesn't mean you're never going to be heartbroken again. I mean, I know nobody ever talks about this, but I'm just going to say it. Like one day that person is going to die or you're going to die. If you live your whole lives together, at some point you're going to have to let that person go. And that's going to be a heartbreaking experience. Like there's no way to really protect ourselves from heartbreak. Except, I guess there is one way, and that's to close down our heart altogether. And that's what she was saying in this video. She was saying that in order to protect ourselves from heartbreak, we live in a perpetual state of brokenheartedness. I would rather just be cynical and disconnected and closed off than to be open and then get let down, and to open myself up again and then get let down, and to open myself up again and then get let down. And even if you are in a healthy relationship, as I said, even if you have your partner and most of the time things are really good and you get along well and you love each other and you care for each other, like life is still going to break your heart sometimes, even if it's not related to your partner. I mean, all you got to do is turn on the news and look at what's happening in the world. And if you have an open heart, it's going to break. If anybody's ever heard of Ram Dass, he's a teacher who's been a big part of my journey. Um, he was a big teacher through the 80s and 90s, and he died a few years ago. But he was a big teacher who's been a big part of my journey. And he talks about this idea of keeping your heart open in hell. Right. And he's like, there's so much suffering in the world. There's so much suffering in the world. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, there are children starving, and there's, relationship drama, and you fall in love and somebody hurts you, and you trust people and you get lied to. And, you turn on the news and you look at what's happening in Gaza, or you look at what's happening in, Ukraine, or just like, there's so much suffering in the world. And in order to protect ourselves from the immense amount of suffering, because like it's so overwhelming, and we can do things like like I do things like I donate money to certain organizations every month, and like I do things that I can do. Part of what I do is this work, right? Like I do this work to try to help people heal and help people have better lives, and that mitigates some of the suffering in the world. But the reality is the suffering in the world is too much for any one person. Right? Any individual, any one of us, when we live in the world with an open heart, that open heart just gets broken over and over and over and over again. And really, our romantic situations are just a part of that. Right? They're just a small part of it. The amount of suffering in the world is immense. And this is why when you go around and like you look, you go to stand in the bank line or stand in the line at the grocery store, and everyone's got like this cynical attitude and everyone's fed up, right? Like that's like kind of the status quo among people. Everyone's just fed up. Right? They're all fed up with life. They're all fed up with existence and complaining about things. And my wife and I joke about it. It's like, we're in this Facebook group for our community, and everyone ever does in the Facebook group is complain. Right? All they do is just talk, oh, can you believe this? Can you believe that? Right? People just complain all the time because everybody's fed up. Everybody's cynical. Everybody's closed down. A lot of these people are married. They're still fed up and cynical and closed down. Right? Like being in a relationship doesn't actually change that. We tend to think it does, but it really doesn't. People fall in love and they feel euphoric for a couple of months, and then they get married and they fall into their day-to-day routines, and then they get shut down and cynical all over again. And the relationship really didn't change much for them. Because what this way of shutting ourselves down is, it's a way of living with a broken heart so we don't have to feel the heartbreak that life brings us every day. It's a way of numbing or deadening ourselves to protect ourselves from the disappointment. It's like, if I never feel happy, then I never have to feel sad. I can just feel numb. I can just feel closed off. I can just feel shut down. And then what I do is I tell myself stories to justify being numb and shut down. So he's, oh, there are no good men out there. Oh, men haven't done the healing work. Oh, it's just a mess out there. You can't trust anybody. And we tell ourselves stories to justify living in a closed off state. And what I want to say is, like, the fatigue and the exhaustion is not actually a result of your past heartbreak. Right? It's not that, oh, well, I've tried so many times and I just can't bring up the energy to try again. And I'm just so exhausted and I'm so defeated by being let down over and over and over again. And I just can't handle it anymore. Like, that's actually not what it is. That's a story you live in to justify keeping yourself closed off. It's a story you tell yourself to justify living in a cynical, closed off, disconnected state. And living in a cynical, closed off, disconnected state, that is what causes the exhaustion. It's not your past heartbreak that causes it. It's the closed off, disconnected, shut down state that causes it. And then you justify being in that state by telling yourself, I just can't try again. I just can't take it. I'm too tired. I'm too exhausted. I've tried too many times. Everybody I meet is disappointing. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I just wanted to remind you that on November 6th, I'm hosting a 7-day Conscious Love Challenge, and I want you to be there. We've done this a few times now. It has been phenomenal each time. The participants have received so much value. The feedback has been incredible, and this next one is going to be the best one yet. This is an opportunity for us to spend 7 days together, working closely and going through the core distinctions and practices that allow you to create conscious love. Whether you're looking to deepen your existing relationship or create a conscious, loving partnership with someone new, this challenge is for you, and I can't wait to meet you and work together. You can find the details for the challenge in the show notes below where you're listening to this podcast. Make sure to check it out and grab your spot now. We start in just 2 weeks, and space is filling up fast. Thanks for joining us today, and let's get back to the show. And I know I might be challenging some beliefs today, but it's good because challenging beliefs is how we create new possibility. And so to get free from the cynical, shut down, disconnected state, what do we have to do? It starts with, and I know this might be just the most simple answer in the world, but it starts with being in the present moment. It starts with being here and now. And you see, what we do is we look at our past and we say, oh, I was married and I got divorced and I fell in love with this person and they broke my heart. And I was in this relationship with this narcissist and they totally just abused me. And I've been dating for the last 5 years and I haven't met anyone great and nobody's done their healing work. And, I feel like I'm the only one who's healed. And I want to say, by the way, this state that I'm describing right now is not a healed state. So if you're sitting there going, I've done all my healing work and no one else has done their healing work, that's not a perspective that comes from a healed state. That's a perspective that comes from wounding. And so you look at your past and you look at all the times you've tried and all the times you've failed and all the times that it hasn't worked out and all the ways that you've been hurt and all the ways that people have disappointed you and all the ways that people have let you down and how nobody's done their healing work and how you can't trust anybody and all these things. And then your present moment experience is defined by all those things that happened in your past. You see, you can't even see the present moment for what it is. You can't even feel the joy that's available to you right now. You can't feel the hope and the possibility and the optimism that's available to you in this present moment because you're bringing all the stuff from the past into it. And then when you bring the stuff from the past into the present moment, you automatically project it in the future. And so what you say is, this is what the past was like, and so this is what the future is going to be like. So why do I even try? Why do I even try? If this is all I've experienced in the past, it's all I can hope for in the future, why do I even try? It's better just to be cynical and shut down and disconnected. And to believe that nobody's done their healing work. And then we surround ourselves with other people who feel the same way. And we say, all my friends feel the same way. And you validate each other's limitations because you sit around and talk about, oh, I went on this bad date and I went on this bad date. And can you believe what this guy did? And on and on and on. And it's a reality that is not out there. It's in here. It's a storyline that you are creating in the present moment and then reinforcing in every new moment. Telling yourself you can't trust anybody. Telling yourself there's nobody good out there. Telling yourself nobody's done the healing work. Telling yourself you can't find the energy to do it again. And what I want to say here is that you don't have to find the energy to do it again. Right? Like, this is the beautiful thing about in the present moment. You don't have to resolve the whole future. You don't have to resolve everything that's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, why it's going to happen. See, in the present moment, you don't have to deal with all of that. All you need to do is be here right now. So for anybody who's feeling exhausted or fatigued or feeling like, oh, I just can't imagine trying again. I can't imagine opening myself up again, and the possibility that I could open myself up and it could end in heartbreak. And that just feels so exhausting and I just can't even bring myself to do that. You don't have to. You don't have to. What you could do is just be where you are right now and do whatever you're going to do today. So this is the question I would pose for anyone who hears this. How can today be the best possible day it could be? Simple question. How could today be the best possible day it could be? If you weren't sitting in your mind, creating a story, telling yourself how bad and how hard everything is and how impossible your situation is and how exhausting you are, if you weren't taking yourself out of the present moment to live in a story like that, what might you be able to do instead? Maybe you'd go sit in the sun. Maybe you'd go for a walk in the park. Maybe you'd go play with your dog. Maybe you'd call up some friends and go for a hike or go out and have dinner. Maybe you'd go dancing. Maybe you'd take a class. Maybe you'd read a book. Maybe you'd go for a bike ride. Right? I mean, there's so many things to do. So many things to do. And so if you weren't destroying this present moment by telling yourself a story about how negative and hopeless and hard things are, what might you be doing instead? And then if you got up tomorrow and you did the same thing, and you did the same thing the day after that, and the same thing the day after that, and the same thing the day after that. And if your friend calls you up and they're like, I just went on this date with this person and you can't believe what a jerk, and it's just so hopeless out there. You say to your friend, you know what? I really don't want to talk about that. If that's all we're going to be able to talk about, I don't know if this friendship really serves me anymore, because I'm trying to be happy. I'm trying to feel good. I'm trying to enjoy my life. And I don't want to sit in circles of people that are complaining and regurgitating their pain and suffering over and over and over again. And I want to be clear about something. I am not talking about toxic positivity here. So I think it's important to address that, right? Because there is a such thing as toxic positivity. And toxic positivity is when we operate over our pain, over our emotional sadness or depression. And it's like a kind of pushing it down and stuffing it down so I don't have to feel it. And then I just pretend I'm happy when I'm really not. So I could also say, if you weren't telling yourself a story about how hard and how hopeless and how disconnected and impossible things are, if you weren't living in that story, what might you do today? Maybe you would cry. Maybe you would write in your journal. Maybe you would take a walk in nature and you would just breathe and you would really feel what you're feeling. Maybe you'd book a call with your therapist. See, I'm not saying to emotionally bypass your experience. I'm saying to experience your experience, whatever it is. If you're feeling joyful today, feel joyful. If you're feeling sad, feel sad. But a mental story reinforcing all the disappointment from your past and painting a bleak picture of the future, that's not even experiencing your experience. That is shutting down your emotional reality. See, this is what we do when we try to protect ourselves from pain. We try to protect ourselves from things we don't want to feel. We stop living in our body. We stop having an embodied experience of life, and we start living in our heads. We start living in our stories. And yeah, I've often talked about this on the podcast where, see, if I'm on a date, let's take this for an example. If I'm on a date and I'm sitting across the table from a person and I'm in my mind and I'm assessing them and I'm going, let me see how much healing work they've done. Let me measure them up against some kind of standard I have. Let me find out what's good about them and what's bad about them. And let me identify all the things and let me make sure I can trust them and like all this stuff, right? You're actually not even on the date. You're somewhere else. You're living in your mind in your own fantasy world that you've created. You're not even present with that person, what's happening. And you're not even seeing that person. You're not even seeing them for who they are, because what you're doing is you're projecting all of your past stuff onto them. Oh, the last 10 people I went on a date with hadn't done any healing work. I bet this person hasn't either. Let me see. And you're projecting all your stuff onto them. You're not even seeing the person for who they are. And there's a filter between you and the person. You can imagine it like a barrier, like a brick wall that you build with your mind, that you are building between you and the person. And what you're doing is you're saying, they're not going to hurt me, because I've built this mental barrier between myself and them. And I'm not going to let this barrier down until they've passed all my tests and they've checked all my boxes. And so you're not in the present moment. You're not in your body. You're not feeling what you're feeling. You're in your mind. You're in a fantasy world that you've created in your mind, in which you think you can control all situations and protect yourself from pain and protect yourself from disappointment. You've isolated yourself from the embodied experience of life by living in your own little world in your mind. By living in a story that you've created to protect yourself from pain. And living in that story is what makes you exhausted. Living in that story is what makes you fatigued. Living in that story is what makes you hopeless. Living in that story is what makes you feel like you could not possibly try again. You see, if that story wasn't there, and for a lot of us, and if you relate to this, and if you've been living in a story like that for a long time, you know, there are no good men out there. There are no good women out there. You can't trust anybody. I could never find the kind of relationship. Why do I even try, right? Like if you've been living in a story like that, nobody's done their healing work. If you've been living in a story like that, then you probably have a lot of repressed pain. And so the first thing to do is to start allowing yourself to feel that pain. Right? Again, I just want to connect the dots here. That story is something you created to protect yourself from the pain. And so when you stop telling that story, when you get out of your mind and into your body and you start feeling what you're feeling in your body, rather than taking yourself out of the body so you don't have to feel it and you can mentally control it, you're probably going to feel some sadness. You're going to feel some loneliness. You're going to feel some heartbreak. You're going to feel some disappointment. And so maybe there will be some time where you just be with that. Maybe you book a call with your therapist and you talk it out, right? But you don't just run your story. You actually talk about what you're feeling. You talk about the sensations in your body. You talk about what it feels like. And that helps you connect more to the feeling of it. And then inevitably what happens, you see, it's like people have said to me before, they're like, if I start crying, I would never stop. Some of you may relate to that, right? You might relate to, I feel like if I were to start crying, I would just never stop. I would just cry a river. Well, actually, that's not true. In fact, the studies that they've done on grief show that grief comes in waves, and it usually lasts about 15 to 30 minutes. Now, if you're grieving the death of a loved one, or like if it's a really intense grief, it might be more than that. But generally it comes in a wave, and if you really feel the wave without disembodying yourself to try to control the wave, it lasts somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. And the wave comes over you, and you feel it wash through you, and you cry. And tears are energy, right? They're energy being released from your body, energy that was being held inside your body or released through tears. And so the wave washes over you, and you cry and you release it, or you take some deep breaths and you really feel into it and you let yourself feel all of it. And it can be very uncomfortable sometimes, right? It can feel like it's taking your breath away. It can feel like you're sick to your stomach. It can feel very uncomfortable, but you just sit with that discomfort for a little bit of time. Again, 15 to 30 minutes, and then it passes through you. And then you actually feel quite alive. There was a woman in my program who her mother passed, and she was going through the program as her mother passed, and she was sharing a lot about just what her experience was as she was grieving her mother. And this was a woman who, young woman, she was very open-hearted and just very emotionally available. And she just like let herself really feel all of it. And it was really beautiful to witness her process where, one day she would be crying, the next day she would be incredibly joyful. And she was just feeling whatever was coming to her in the moment without trying to take herself out of the experience and mentally control what was happening. She was physically letting herself grieve the loss of her mother. And it was intense. She had been her mother's caretaker for years as her mother was fighting cancer. It was an intense journey for her. And so grief, and when I talk about grief, I'm talking about any form of sadness or loss or loneliness or depression, right? Grieving the marriage that ended, grieving the relationship that ended, grieving the person that I got excited about, but then they weren't who I thought they were, grieving the abuse that I experienced, grieving whatever it might be that we're grieving. When we really allow ourselves to feel that, a wave passes through us, and then we're free. And so when we take ourselves out of the story that makes us exhausted and fatigued and cynical and hopeless, when we take ourselves out of the story, we feel what the story has been protecting ourselves from. And there's likely, if you've been living in that story for a long time, there's likely some form of grief. And you've been mentally controlling the grief rather than feeling it. But then, as you start to feel it, and as you start to just let this energy move through you, as I shared with the young woman who was grieving her mother, right? The energy moves through you and it passes, and then it's followed by a new experience. And maybe the next day you wake up and you feel light and free and joyful and excited. And all of a sudden you haven't wanted to go on a date in months, and all of a sudden dating seems like a good idea. Why does it seem like a good idea? Because you're not carrying that heavy story that makes it seem so awful. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you enjoy the Conscious Love Show, there are a few things you can do with just a few seconds of your time that will really support us in being able to continue bringing these messages to you every single week, completely free of charge. The first thing you can do is give us a 5-star rating on one of the major podcast platforms. The two most popular for this show are Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but you can leave a rating on any platform where you listen to this podcast. And if you'd be willing to take just an extra moment, you can write a few words about the show and share with people how it's touched you and the difference it's made in your life. That will go a very long way in supporting our show. Possibly the biggest thing you can do to support the show is share it with someone that you know can benefit from it. If you get a lot out of it, it's very likely that a friend or loved one of yours will too. And I appreciate it so much when people share the show. If you wanted to take the extra step, you could post a link to today's show on your stories or socials and help get the word out in that way. If you'd be willing to take just one of these steps today, I would appreciate that so much. And I want to say thank you in advance for caring about the show and being willing to support it. Thanks again for listening today. Your presence here means everything to me, and I hope you continue joining me each week for many years to come. Lots of love, and let's get back to the show. And maybe you go out on a date with someone and you're not really that attracted to them, and maybe they haven't done that much healing work, and maybe they're not your ideal match, but maybe you just have a wonderful time anyway. Maybe when you're not filtering that person through your protective story, maybe you're able to see that person for who they really are, and you just say, you know what? They're just so beautiful the way they are. They don't need to change. They don't need to be different. I also don't need to marry them. But you know what? This is just a beautiful human being on their journey. And we have the opportunity right now on this date for a half hour or for 2 hours or for however long it lasts, that we have this opportunity to bless each other. And you know what? I can really see them and I can really love them in whatever amount of time we spend together. And when we end tonight, if I don't want to see him again, I say, listen, it's been wonderful getting to know you. You're a beautiful person. I wish you the absolute best on your journey. I hope you find everything you're looking for. I don't know that I'm going to want to see each other again, but it was wonderful connecting with you tonight. And I wish you the absolute best. And you know what? They'll wish the same for you. And in that interaction, both of you healed a little bit. Because you were willing to let love be expressed where before cynicism or doubt or criticism would have been expressed. You see, now you're healing. And I said this earlier, looking at someone and going, oh, they haven't done enough healing work. That's not a healed perspective. And I say this with a lot of love. If you're doing that, you're not as healed as you think you are. Because from a healed perspective, you would just see how beautiful that person is and you would just love them. And you would also be connected to your truth. And so when you're connected to your truth, there's an intuitive hit that says, I really want to see this person again. Or I don't want to see this person again. Right? When you're connected to your truth, when you're on that date and you're sitting across the table from that person and you're experiencing their energy and they're experiencing your energy, and you're not filtering them through your protective belief systems and your storylines, and you're just connecting with someone heart to heart and you're having an experience of them, there's going to be a very clear, intuitive signal that's like, I want to see this person again, or I don't. And what I suggest to all my clients, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, if you want to see them again, you tell them. I'd love to see you again. Or I don't want to see you again. And then they can tell you how they feel. They want to see you or they don't want to see you. And if they don't want to see you and you want to see them, then that hurts a little bit. That's a little disappointing. And so you'll need to let that wave pass through you. right? You're going to grieve that even though you only saw them for an hour, but in that hour you felt a connection, you got excited and you got hopeful. And then you said, I'd love to see you again. And they say, I wouldn't love to see you again. And so now you've got to grieve that. It's not a big grief. It's not grieving the loss of your mother. It's just a little grief. But you're grieving the hope that you had, the excitement that you had, the energy that was built up, and now it's being let down. And so you feel that and you let that move through you. And maybe it makes you a little sad, and maybe it activates that old story, and you have to remind yourself, I don't want to go into my old story, right? I just want to feel this experience and just feel my way through it. And then tomorrow I'll be better. And then tomorrow life will go on. And so what I'm getting at here is that when we bring ourselves into our present experience, when we really feel what we're feeling, when we really allow ourselves to be fully embodied in the experience that we are having in the moment, we can disconnect from whatever story we're telling ourselves. The story is what causes the cynicism, the doubt, the exhaustion, the fear. The story is what makes it feel so hopeless. Because here's the thing, like, you don't necessarily have to meet anybody. Or if you're with someone, you don't have to stay with them. You could do whatever you want. You could be single for the rest of your life. You could leave your marriage if you want to. You could do anything you want to do. And so all you've really got to do in this moment is feel the fullness of the experience and honor whatever truth is being revealed to you in that experience. And the story is something that we just put on to try to protect ourselves from pain, to try to protect ourselves from disappointment. I want to go back to something I said earlier. It's choosing to live with a broken heart rather than allowing our heart to be broken over and over and over and over and over again. And life will break your heart over and over and over and over again. If it's not your partner who does it, it's going to be something else. I spoke about this earlier. The suffering of life, like to live as an empathetic, open-hearted individual in this world, and to walk around and to see the kinds of suffering that people are experiencing, it just hurts. It just hurts. Like I read through the comments on my Instagram post, and people attack me and everyone and everything else. And I don't take it personally. I know it really doesn't have anything to do with me. They're just sharing their pain. They're just projecting their suffering onto me or onto the conversation or onto the other people in the comments or whatever. But I look at that and it hurts, not because it doesn't hurt because I take it personally. I know it has nothing to do with me, but it hurts because I feel the pain that that person is experiencing when they leave that nasty comment. You know, in the work I do, I'm subjected to the pain of people every day. And I mean, if I were to close myself off to that, then I just wouldn't be very good at what I do. And so There's a way of living in life where you are not trying to protect yourself from the things that you don't want to feel, where you're not trying to bar yourself off from the things you don't want to feel. And this is absolute freedom. You see, I've spoken about this many times, is that when you are no longer afraid to feel pain or to feel heartbreak or to be disappointed or to be let down, you become absolutely free in life. There is no limit. There's nothing that's holding you back anymore, because the only reason you ever held yourself back from anything was because you were afraid of how it would feel. Right? The only reason you didn't go for it in that relationship with that person you were really attracted to is because you were afraid of what it would feel like if they rejected you. The only reason you didn't speak your truth or in that situation or ask for what you wanted in that situation was because you were afraid of how it would feel if it didn't work out. You see, all of the barriers and parameters and things that we avoid and things that we try to control in life, all of it is simply trying to protect us from something we don't want to feel. Because the reality of being fully alive and fully participating in life means that we get heartbroken. And so there are really only two choices here. You can shut down, you can become cynical, you can isolate yourself within your own mind. You can develop a narrative and a storyline that has everything all figured out. It explains everything. Right? You make assumptions about how all men are or how all women are. And that makes you feel safe because you know how they are and you know what to expect from them. So nobody's ever going to catch you off guard. And you live inside of your mind and inside of the story you've created, and this shuts you down and makes you cynical, and you live with a broken heart consistently to make sure that you never become heartbroken. The other way to live is to open yourself up to feeling all of it, to learn to feel all of it. And some days you are very joyful, and some days you're very sad. But the amazing thing is, see, this is what's so cool about this, is that on the days when you're really sad, it's not that big of a deal because you know it's only a matter of time until you're joyful again. So if you're feeling something and you feel down, well, you know that I'm just going to be with this today. And maybe I'm going to take it a little slower today. Maybe I'm going to take a little extra care of myself today. Maybe I'm just not going to, push so hard, or maybe there's a project that I was working on, but maybe I could just push that project off until tomorrow and I could just take today to just be with myself and take care of myself. And you know that as you just are willing to be with that, whatever that is, that your joy is right around the corner. And then what starts to happen is you start to have this incredible courage where in the past you would have hold on to a relationship oh my God, I can't let this person go. Who would I be without them? If they leave me, I'll never survive it. And then that starts to change and you're just you know what? I can be without this relationship. Yeah, it's going to hurt for a while. Yeah, I'll cry myself to sleep for a while. I'll grieve the loss. And then life will go on. And I know I'll be happy again on the other side of it. You see, it's not about what's happening out there. And I understand there's a lot happening out there. The world is crazy and people are wounded. I get it. I see it. I experience it firsthand all the time. People are hurting. In my line of work, I put myself in the fire every day. I put something on social media, I get attacked, I get all kinds of stuff. I know how much people are hurting. But I don't want to let someone else's pain determine who I am or how I feel. I don't want to make myself cynical to protect myself from the suffering in the world. And so I want to answer the question directly. How do you overcome the fatigue around dating when you've been disappointed so many times? When you've been let down so many times, when you've gotten your hopes up and you've been dropped, and maybe you've been through a divorce, or maybe you've been through, some kind of narcissistic abuse, or you've been through so much, and the idea of starting again just feels so exhausting. How do you overcome that? You figure out how you can make today the best day possible. And you start to make that your commitment every day. How do I make today the best day possible? For a lot of you, it might be like, I don't even want to think about dating right now. You don't need to date. Like even the assumption that you need to date is kind of a weird idea. The idea that you need to start over with someone and go through it all again. That's kind of a weird idea. What does that have to do with what you're doing today? Nothing. It's completely unrelated to what is happening right now in your life. You're taking yourself out of your life, living in some imagined future where you've got to do all this heavy stuff that's so hard and exhausting. That has nothing to do with what's happening right now. What's happening right now? You're doing your work, or you're going for a walk, or you're cooking your dinner, or you're talking to a friend, or you're playing with your dog. You're doing whatever. That's what's happening right now. And so you start to focus on the here and the now. How can today be the best possible day it can be? And as you start to make that your commitment every day, I'm going to make today the best possible day it could be. And then what you start to do is, maybe after a while, it feels like, you know what? Let me just get on the dating apps. Let me just see if I connect with anyone. Or maybe your friend says, hey, I met this great person. I think you two would really hit it off. I'm going to give him your phone number, whatever. Maybe you run into someone at the coffee shop, or you run into someone when you're on a hike, or you go to a class or a group or a spiritual gathering or something, and you meet somebody there. Maybe you just start living your life without the pressure of needing to start again and needing to make it work and needing to meet someone and needing all of it to happen. Maybe you just start living your life without that storyline as a part of it. And then you start to meet people in a natural and effortless and organic way. Maybe you start to make friends rather than seeking someone. You start seeking lots of people, men, women, everybody. You start making friends wherever you can. You start getting invitations to things. You just start living life for the joy that's available right now. And maybe somewhere along that path, someone comes into your life and you start spending some time with them and you start saying, wow, there's something really great about this person. I think a relationship with this person might work. But even in that, it's like, if it doesn't, it's okay. I've been doing just fine by myself this whole time. If this doesn't work out, I can do just fine by myself. But I feel like this person might be worth trying with. And even in that, you're not like, how am I going to go from here all the way through the rest of my life and make sure that I'm happy forever and make sure that I never get disappointed again? No, you're just right here and right now. And you're just like, well, I'm going to go on a second date with them. I'm going to go on a third date with them. Wow, we've been on 10 dates in the last month. I feel like this is going somewhere. And maybe you have a conversation with that person about, where do you see this going? This is where I see it going. And maybe they feel the same way, or maybe they don't. But whatever is happening, it's happening in the here and now, and you're living in what's happening in the here and now. You're not living in a storyline of what's going to happen in the future and how's it going to happen and when's it going to happen and how am I going to control it and how am I going to make sure I don't get disappointed again. And that's what's exhausting. That's what causes the fatigue. And what I want to say here is, for anybody who's relating to this or who's going through this right now, the gift in all of this is that this is actually facilitating your own healing, because what I'm talking about is healing. The disappointing experiences that you're having that are making you feel so fatigued, the disappointing experiences that are facilitating the storyline are actually pushing you to let go of the story. They're actually pushing you to get out of the drama and into the moment where your joy can actually be found. You see, that story never dies. You'll get into a relationship and then you'll start telling a story about the relationship. And you'll get married to the person and then you'll start telling a story about your marriage. And then this is what a lot of married people do, is they've been married for 10 years and they look back on everything they missed out on because they were married and everything their partner deprived them of because they spent the last 10 years with them when they could have been doing blah, blah, blah. See, this whole idea that a relationship equals happiness is total BS. Your ability to find joy today in the here and now is what equals happiness. And if you can't do that without a relationship in your life, you're not going to do it with a relationship in your life. It's highly likely that as you get comfortable and content doing that without a relationship in your life, then as that energy around you starts to grow and that joy and that vibrance and that enthusiasm and that inspiration and that connection starts to grow and you start to build an energy field around yourself that's based in all of that, it's highly likely that you will attract someone who is also living a life that's based in all of that, and the two of you will co-create something together. There's a really good possibility of that. But it starts with, again, how do I make today the best possible day? And I want to say, for anyone, if you're grieving a loss right now, if you're going through a breakup, if you're let down because you were excited about something and it didn't work out, I'm not saying that you don't feel that. But feel that without building a protective story around it. Be present in your body, in the experience you're having, rather than living in your mind to try to control the experience you're having. All right, so I want to open up for some questions now. If you have questions, go ahead, drop them in the chat. I'm going to scroll back through here and see what we have. So I'm going to start with this question from Ibensol. So does that also count for a partner that you are with? I mean, if you're focusing a lot on his unhealed wounds, does that mean that I'm not healed? Okay, perfect. Thank you for the question. And I know earlier I was talking about where if you're so focused on how unhealed someone else is, that you're not really as healed as you think you are, right? And so I know where your question is coming from when you ask that. So if you're in a relationship with someone and you're focused on all of their unhealed wounds, does that mean you're not healed? I do think it's a little bit different if you're in a relationship with someone versus if you're just on a date with them. And here's the difference. When you're on a date with someone, That person doesn't owe you anything. You don't owe them anything, right? There's no attachment there. So the projection of like, is this person healed, and putting all this pressure on a date for someone to need to be a certain way, that's usually a reflection of your own wounding, right? Your own protective mechanisms where like, oh, I'm sizing this person up because I'm trying to protect myself. And so I'm judging their wounds or their lack of healing or whatever. But it's different a little bit when you're in a relationship. Now, I'm going to say a lot of us, yes, are in relationships and doing so from an unhealed place. And being in a relationship from an unhealed place does make us highly attentive to the other person's wounds. But this is what I would say. I can't say specifically for you where that's coming from, because it could also be that you have grown a lot, that you have expanded a lot in your own awareness of yourself and your own healing journey. And now because you're growing, you're starting to see more of things about them that you didn't see before, right? Like the gap, if you've been growing and this person hasn't been growing and the gap between you is getting larger, it starts to become more clear that maybe I'm not so compatible with this person. But this is what I want to say, right? From an unhealed place, we need people to be different to make ourselves feel better. Right? From an unhealed place, I need my partner to change because their lack of healing is disrupting my happiness. From a healed place, we don't need them to be different. We see them as they're perfect, they're wonderful, they're just fine, just the way they are. And now I may say, I see all of them. I see the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. I see the healed parts, the unhealed parts. I see the wounds. And you know what? I love this human being. They're a wonderful human being. We've created so much together, and I fully accept them as they are, the healed parts, the unhealed parts, and everything in between. So that might be a choice you make. But if you make that choice, you're not constantly focused on the unhealed parts because you've accepted them. You've accepted this person. You've accepted the relationship. You love them. You care about them. You want to be with them. And so you accept all of them. Now, you may also say, you know what? Like when I got with this person years ago, I was in a different place and certain things weren't important to me then that are important to me now. And I've grown a lot and this person hasn't really grown much. And, you know, their wounded parts are maybe making the relationship very difficult, or maybe there are aspects of them that are very toxic that, you know, earlier in my life, I was willing to accept this treatment, but I'm no longer willing to accept this treatment, right? So it's not judging them. It's not tearing them down or over focus on their wounding, but there's an awareness that, you know what, I can't accept today what I could accept 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I have grown in a way where I can no longer allow this in my life. And so that would be the point where you choose to end the relationship. And so from a healed perspective, you can be aware of where someone is, but there's no judgment behind it. And you either choose to remain with that person and love them as they are, or you choose that, you know what, I cannot accept or be with this person because of certain things, and you remove yourself. And of course, maybe if you choose to remove yourself, there's a grief that happens there. And I've talked about that today. But as you said, you're focusing a lot on his unhealed wounds. And so this is what I would invite you. You're focusing on his unhealed wounds. Ask yourself the question, what are his unhealed wounds calling forth from you? Are you focusing on his unhealed wounds because you feel like you can't leave and you feel trapped? And so because you're in a kind of prisoner situation, the only thing you can do is tear him down? Like maybe his unhealed wounds are calling you into another level of your power where you need to step up and say, I can't accept this. I want out. Or maybe there are things you can accept. Maybe you love the person enough that you don't want to leave them, but you're pointing out his wounds as a kind of righteous judgment because you want to feel superior, or you want to feel more enlightened, or you want to feel like you know better. And if you're doing that, what that really is a way of avoiding how those wounds are reflecting places in yourself. Right? You're not wanting to look in the mirror and see what this relationship is reflecting to you. And so you point the finger. So it could be either one. But look, here at the end of the day, you either choose that you want to be with this person as they are, or you choose that you don't want to be with this person as they are. Either is an empowered choice. Either is a wonderful assertion of your sovereignty and your power. But to be undecided about that and constantly criticize the other person, that's not powerful at all. That's you feeling helpless and powerless in a situation and projecting and blaming and criticizing as a way to get a kind of fake power because of how powerless you feel in the situation. So I hope that supports you. I hope you can find some clarity in that. Sending you love. Again, the question I'm inviting you to consider is, what are his unhealed wounds calling forth from you? Thank you so much for the question. Sending love. Beautiful question. Okay, this question is from Dr. Suman. How to live in the moment and avoid having imagination or aspirations for the future. I mean, that's a big question. I mean, if we could all live in the moment, like we're basically talking about enlightenment here. So I don't know if there's a way to do that perfectly all the time. But what I'm getting at in today's conversation is breaking free from the story. And so if we were to take a practical example, if you're in your mind ruminating about when am I going to meet someone, or how am I going to meet someone, or how am I going to start over again when I do meet someone, or I've been so heartbroken or hurt in the past, I don't think I can go through that again, right? You're living in a rumination. You're living in a cultivated storyline that is causing suffering, and you're not living your life here and now because you're focused and consumed by your fears and imaginings about what the future might hold. And that's connected to your past, right? So you're taking your pain and your disappointment and your dissatisfaction from the past, and you're projecting it into the future, and you're imagining how horrible it could all be and how difficult it could be and how exhausting it all feels. And so you're, rather than being here and now where you are today, you're living in this kind of time creation that feels very heavy and feels very exhausting, creates suffering. This is how we create suffering as human beings. And so if you were caught up in some kind of rumination like that, what I would say is bring you back to the question, how do you make today the best day it could possibly be? Now, you talk about having imaginations and aspirations of the future. Those can sometimes be positive. And so if you have a positive picture of the future, I mean, granted, we could say like the ultimate enlightened state would be here and now, or to be here and now, and to not be worried about the future, to, be doing what I'm doing when I'm doing it. That's like the ultimate enlightened state, without any fear or concern or ideas about what the future holds, and just allow myself to kind of naturally move into each moment as it comes. But I don't know if that's really realistic or practical for most people. What is practical is to take yourself out of a mental rumination of suffering, put your attention on where you are now, and start focusing on making this the best day it could possibly be. And make that a practice that you do every single day. Now, if you have a positive idea of the future, if you think, you know what, I know there are a lot of great people out there, I know I can meet someone. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's going to make you feel hopeful. That's going to make you feel excited. So having a positive imagination or aspiration for the future is not a bad thing. That can often motivate you today. My ideas about what the future can hold often motivate me to do things today that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So it's not always bad to have ideas or aspirations about the future. But what you want to do is notice when your thoughts are causing you suffering. Notice when you are living in a certain storyline that is causing suffering in your life. And then when you're living in a storyline that is causing suffering in your life, you bring yourself out of the storyline and into the here and now. And you say, what can I do today? How can I just enjoy today? How can I just make today the best possible day it can be? So I hope that answers your question. It's a great question. Again, I'm not saying that we should always be completely present in every moment and never have a thought or feeling about the future. Right? I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that, as we find ourselves suffering, there's a way to free ourselves from it. Okay, this question is from Shelly ZW. How do you know when you are ready to put yourself back out there? Okay, so beautiful question. Again, this is bring us back to the topic for today, right? I would ask, do you need to know when you're ready to put yourself back out there? Do you need to know? Right? Like, or even the question assumes that there's some kind of right answer to it. You could be ready now. You could feel ready today and not feel ready tomorrow. You could be ready and feel great about it for 5 weeks and then take a week off. And so again, if we come back to the question, I know I sound like a broken record. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but if we come back to the question, how can you make today the best possible day it could be? That's all you need to do. Let tomorrow take care of itself. And so how do you know if you're ready? Well, if you feel ready today, then you're ready. If you don't feel ready tomorrow, then you don't have to do anything about it tomorrow. If today the idea of dating or putting yourself out there feels exhausting, then don't do it today. Do something else. You see, this is what we do is we feel, I'll stick with today's topic, right? I feel like the idea of dating is exhausting. I feel like putting myself back out there again is just exhausting and overwhelming. It's too much. I can't handle it. And then we assume that because I feel that way right now, I'm always going to feel that way. And then I get afraid. I go, if I'm always going to feel that way, how am I ever going to meet someone? I can't be exhausted forever. I've got to meet, if I'm exhausted and I just sit home exhausted all the time, then I'm never going to meet someone. I want to meet someone. I don't want to be alone for my whole life. So what am I going to do about this? And then we get caught up in the storyline about it. And we are literally perpetuating the experience. But the thing is, your feelings are always changing. If you feel exhausted today, take a break. If you feel heartbroken today, cry. If you can't manage the idea of getting involved with someone today, then take care of yourself. That's all you got to do. And this is my promise to you. This is my promise. If you start making it a practice of making today the best possible day it could be, and you get up tomorrow and you do that again, and you do that again, and you do that again, and you start getting into a flow of being where you are and enjoying your life as it is right now, and you make a practice of pulling yourself out of these fear-based storylines, what's going to happen in a matter of time, in a matter of weeks, or in a matter of months, is all of a sudden dating's not going to feel so hopeless anymore. You're going to be like, you know what? I could go out on a date. That might actually be kind of fun. I'd like to meet someone. I'd like to, explore some romance or, that sounds interesting. That sounds exciting. And maybe you get on the app for 15 minutes and you just scroll and you send out a couple messages and you're just like, oh, let's see what happens. Or maybe you meet someone somewhere and you strike up a conversation and you're like, wow, that was a great conversation. I'd like to meet people more often. But you don't have to do more today than you want to do. And you don't have to determine when you're ready, because there is no when you're ready. Sometimes you feel ready, sometimes you don't. If you're grieving right now, you don't have to feel this pressure to get over your grief and get back out there. You can just grieve. And as you process your grief and as you move through that season of grieving, whether that's weeks or months or however long it is, as you process that, the idea of getting out there and meeting someone is not going to feel so big and so scary anymore. Right? So what I want to encourage you is forget about when you're going to be ready and focus on where you are right now. Focus on what's real for you today. Focus on making today the best possible day it could be. Focus on seeing the good that is in your life right now. Focus on feeling your experience, whatever that experience is, fully. That's it. You don't need to pressure yourself for more than that. And times will come when you will feel ready. That's all you got to do. So sending you love, beautiful question. Thank you so much for asking it. Thank you everybody for being on with me today. It's always a pleasure. I'm going to go ahead and close it out. We've had some fantastic questions today. I want to thank again the person who sent in the original question that started today's discussion, sending you love, and to all of you sending love. I know this is tough. It's so easy to get caught up in a storyline like this. It's so easy to allow our past pain to define our future. And the only way out of that is in the here and now. Right? So if you're ruminating about something, if there are thoughts in your mind that are causing you to suffer today, just tell yourself, I don't have to figure it all out right now. All I got to do is just put those thoughts on hold and just be where I am. Do whatever I want to do today. Make today the best possible day it could be. And tomorrow I'll feel different. Lots of love, everybody. Thank you for being with me. Big love and blessings. Make sure to subscribe to the Conscious Love Show podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts the most. And I'll see you back here next week. Lots of love, everybody. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.